Deep diving again on another 49ers draft pick, our final draft pick. There's still some undrafted free agents to get to, but Robert Beal Jr., the edge rusher out of Georgia. Strengths, weaknesses. How does he fit into the San Francisco 49ers defense? Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Hope you had a great Memorial Day holiday. Croc and I back at it here, breaking down another prospect for you. Robert Beal Jr., Georgia edge defender, 5th round pick for the 49ers. What we think he's going to do in the NFL, where he wins, where he doesn't, what he needs to work on, all of that from looking at that Georgia film of the prospect and the 49ers rookie. And a question about Steve Wilks. How different do we expect the 49ers defense to be under yet another defensive coordinator in 2023? All that coming up on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Okay, Robert Beal, Croc. He put on a show at the Combine as far as the testing numbers for Robert Beal. And when you're talking about back-to-back national champion Georgia defense that just sent a ton of guys to the league, and a player that was one of the starters on that defense in the 2022 season, Robert Beal Jr., 6'3", just short of 6'4", 247 pounds at the Combine, nearly 35-inch arms, 34 5/8-inch arm length, big hands, 10-inch plus, ran 4.44 in the 40-yard dash, Croc, with a 30-inch vertical, 10.3 broad jump. Didn't run the agilities at the Combine, did run agilities at the Georgia Pro Day, though, which was 4.42 in the short shuttle and 7.26 in the 3-cone with 14 bench press reps. So some great and some pretty average testing numbers, depending on what portion of the spectrum. There's an explosion score. If you're looking at relative athletic scores, there's an explosion score. There's a change of direction score. There is size score, and there is a speed score. And on the speed score, he absolutely scores very high. But before we get too deep into what he did in the testing and what his testing numbers were, Croc, we gotta dive into the tape a little bit. And when you put on Georgia's tape and you saw number 33 out there, what did you think when you watched him on tape?
Well, I think we do have to start with the testing. And I'm holding up a bag. It's not a flag. It's red, though. If you're on YouTube right now, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. But I'm holding up a red bag. It's supposed to be a flag. And I think he's a huge red flag. Just hearing that, right? If I did not know anything about him, right? I don't know anything about his film, right? I haven't watched the film, but I see a guy from Georgia that's 6'4", basically 250 pounds, and runs a 4.44 40, which is crazy, with 34-inch arm length, right? But you go in the 5th round on a defense where everyone else on that defensive line is going top 10, top 15. Like, those guys are flying off the board. Even the one, I think there was an edge rusher. Did he go to Philly? I feel like they're all going to Philadelphia, but
Nolan Smith.
Nolan Smith
went number 30 to the Eagles.
He still went late, first round, right? Like, those guys are all going first round. Why are you not going first round? To me, and you're the oldest one, right? This is a guy that's like, 4th year senior or 5th year senior. So to me, without cutting on any film, I don't think it takes a rocket science to say there's something not quite right with this prospect when every other guy from Georgia, they're flying off the boards. And you have everything teams are looking for: the height, the weight, the length, the speed. And you went 5th round. I had to throw a flag. That's a huge red flag. Do you not agree?
Croc throwing a flag early in this episode of Locked On 49ers. I totally agree. And when you do put on the tape, it makes you understand maybe why. And first of all, when you put on the tape, Croc, he's hard to find because he's not on the field all the time. He's a rotational player, even starting, and he started 8 of 15 games. So he didn't start every game, but I think it's just part of the rotation. Was he on the field or was he not? But, the role I don't think changed much game to game for him. As a sort of a 3-4 sort of a stand-up outside linebacker, off-ball backer at times, dropping into coverage at times, hand on the ground, rushing the passer at times. So defensive end / outside backer. He's going to play at that D-end role, but could rush as a stand-up rusher for the 49ers. But I kept getting, because he's wearing number 33 as a defensive line.
13.
Guy that was built exactly the same as wearing 13. I was like, oh, there he is. I was like, oh, that's 1-3, not 3-3. That's not him. And he's just on the field, off the field. And he was moving around a lot, so it was hard to find him sometimes, but it was also hard to find him because he just wasn't making that many impactful plays.
I think if I'm the 49ers, right, and again, and I watched the film. All right, so actually, let's talk about the film first. It was kind of hard to really find him, but the one thing that's been difficult with the Georgia defensive guys, think about the guys that are going really high. A lot of, Jordan Davis, interior guy. The kid that went top 10 this year and probably would have been top 5 if not for some of the off-field concerns, interior guy. Their edge rushers, even though Walker went number 1 overall a year ago, and people kind of questioned that, but Trent Baalke special. Their path to the quarterback is very unique, and I think for him as well. So if there is a silver lining, and I know I was hard on the red flag, and I don't regret throwing the red flag on him, but watching them is definitely not a defense that's like the 49ers. What do we know about the 49ers defense? Wide 9, pin your ears back, get upfield, and get to that quarterback. Don't worry about everything else. The linebackers, they'll clean it up. We'll have the gaps for them, and we'll let other draft picks like D. Winters and these other guys get after it. But for edge rushers, we want you to use that ability, that speed, and get upfield right now and turn that corner and get to the quarterback. That is not Georgia's defense. You talked about it. Is it a 3-4 defense? I don't know exactly what it is, and I'm not this big schematic person defensively, but just from an ability standpoint, it almost feels like kind of the equivalent to Kyle Shanahan's offense, where for some of these guys, it feels like there's a lot of thinking involved, and how much can the thinking take away from some of your athletic ability? So when you do see a guy that's as freakishly athletic as this, how much was he just thinking on his way to potentially being a pass rusher for Georgia? Walker's numbers a year ago, a lot of people questioned it. You didn't see just this great production, and there was a lot of projecting what that might look like at the next level. But Jacksonville Jaguars and Trent Baalke said, we don't care. We're going to take him number 1 overall regardless. When I look at this film here, I see some of the same, where I don't know exactly what his responsibilities are on his way to the quarterback, but it's definitely not a guy that just, hey, I'm this great long arm athlete, and I'm just going to put these pass rush moves, to the test every single play and get after the quarterback. So I think, although there are a lot of red flags in the sense of why he was drafted in the 5th round, in comparison to a lot of his teammates that he played with, but also I could see where maybe you see a better version of him with the 49ers, just because the scheme is set up for a guy like him to be a little bit more successful.
I think it's all well said on all points there, Croc. And you mentioned all the defensive linemen. So last year there was Trayvon Walker went number 1. There was Davis, who went 12, 13, something like that. And then Devontae Wyatt, who went to the end of the first round, another D tackle. And then there was Jalen Carter this year. There was Nolan Smith. So that's 5 guys.
And that's just the D line. They got the second level guys.
Oh yeah,
Corey Walker was a first round pick.
Walker.
I mean, they got guys flying off at the second level as well.
Right,
and
right.
If not for the Smith, right? The linebacker Smith, he went to Philadelphia as well.
Yeah,
he had the shoulder surgery and the issues, and that kind of knocked him down. So he got drafted 3rd round. But I mean, just their front 7, typically it's front 7. I don't know what the hell defense they play, but typically those guys, they're for Georgia, they are flying off of the boards. And for Bill, that was not the case.
Right. And so you could make the argument that, well, he would have been a starter for 3 years on another defense. He just happened to be behind these guys. So I think that might be some of the arguments. Like, okay, well, if he only started 8 games in his 5th his fifth year senior season in 2022, and he only started 2 games his entire college career before that, which were all in the 2021 season. Was it just because he had, he was a 4-star that had 5 stars in front of him? Is that the reason, or was he just a reserve player and that's just all he was? And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg argument with Robert Beal, but I think you hit on something that's very interesting that we'll get to next, Croc, and that is just scheme alone, but also with his ability. Is there a lot more there, production wise in the NFL than there was for him in college? So let's touch on that aspect of it and touch a little bit more on his game on film and some other background notes on Robert Beal Jr., the 49ers 5th round edge rusher out of Georgia, next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to the no sweat first bet is growing, Croc. It's up to $2,500 now. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And there's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book in FanDuel. There's NHL playoffs, so go along with NBA playoffs. We've got a Heat at Celtics game 7, which is unbelievable. Celtics favored in this one by 7.5 points. By the time some of you listen to this podcast, that game will be over and we will know who advanced to the finals between the Celtics and the Heat. So you can get on all the action, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball all summer long, and of course, NFL futures as well. So go to FanDuel right now and you can sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, Croc. So the star-studded defensive front there for Georgia, and that's what Robert Beal walked into when he was a 4-star recruit out of the state of Georgia, stayed in state. He had first had he had a lot of offers. He wasn't quite a 5-star guy, but he was a 4-star recruit. Number 8 weak side defensive end in the 2017 recruiting class, number 11 recruit in the entire state of Georgia. And he got offers from Alabama and Florida State and Clemson and LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, Stanford, Texas, USC. So all the big times. He actually committed to Notre Dame, decided to stay though in state.
These are good schools, man. Stanford, academically, you're talking about a guy, he's no dummy, right? Like, this is a smart guy. He just decided, I'm going to stay and represent Georgia, which Georgia per capita, I mean, they have a ton of talent. Georgia, there's another, I think Louisiana, some states that don't have as many people as like California, but they're putting out prospects at just a super high rate. So for him to be the 11th overall prospect coming out of Georgia, that says a lot because, I mean, that's an extremely talented state.
So I misspoke earlier. I said he was a 5th-year senior. He was actually a 6th-year senior because he redshirted that true freshman season in 2017, then got on the field and had 15 tackles in 2018 in his redshirt freshman season. But then he entered the transfer portal, Croc, in December of 2019 after his 3rd year there, which was his redshirt sophomore year. I think he saw the writing on the wall, right? He saw the guys in front of him. He's like, I might not get much playing time on this Georgia defense. So he entered the portal, but ended up withdrawing his name a month later and sticking around at Georgia. So then, got in the field a little bit, the COVID season in 2020, no stats. He played 7 games, but nothing to show for it on the stat sheet. No tackles, 8 tackles the year before. Then as a redshirt junior, 2021, 23 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 7.5 for loss. That would have been his best season production-wise, a couple pass defense too. So, he ranges out into coverage at times. And then last year, 2022, his final season, his 6th year in college, as a super senior there with the extra COVID year, 26 tackles total, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and 1 forced fumble on the season. So, not a ton of production at all. 6 years, 5 of those where he actually was on the roster and playing, 10.5 total sacks, 12 tackles for loss, and 72 tackles in his entire college career. So not productive at all. Now, you mentioned something there when you put on the tape and you watched Robert Beal. and we'll get into the strengths and weaknesses. But they do not ask, and Nolan Smith wasn't super productive stats-wise. You mentioned the other edge guy in Trayvon Walker, went number 1 overall. Crazy traits, right? But not super productive stats-wise. And he wasn't super productive in the NFL last year either. And that was one of the arguments with Trayvon Walker. He's got all these traits. He's going to be more productive in another scheme. And there were times he looked okay. Times it was like, I'm not so sure. He was that number 1 overall guy. So that's where I struggle with Robert Beal. Is he just not going to ever be a super productive player and there's something really missing in his game? Or when he's allowed to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback, are we going to see a really different player? Because I don't think he was allowed to do that a lot at Georgia. And they were playing a lot of, kind of let's play the run, set the edge and play the run on the way to the quarterback. So you saw a lot of that, let's see. Okay, let's go to the quarterback. And when he does let it rip, you do see some traits on tape occasionally.
Now, that's the part right there where I think as a 49er fan, you could be a little excited because he doesn't have to be the guy here. Heck, you can play him 12 snaps in a game and be fine with that. If all those 12 snaps are third down plays and you want somebody that's just going to be a hellraiser off of the edge and get after the quarterback. And can the 49ers, as far as working on his development, start there? All right. Now maybe they go the opposite way and they're like, well, actually, yes, he has all these traits. But we actually like him against the run first, right? He is this strong guy. He can be stout because of the defense that he played at Georgia. Let's actually use him in early downs. But I think for what we're wanting, you want that guy that can complement Nick Bosa when teams are throwing the ball. Now, another red flag. All right, another red flag here. Georgia, they beat a lot of teams pretty bad. So wouldn't that mean that those teams are in more situations where they have to throw? So why aren't him and Nolan Smith and Walker, why aren't they more productive when these teams? I mean, I watched them against Arkansas, not this season, the past season, and I mean they just destroyed Arkansas. Arkansas couldn't do anything. But all of a sudden it's like, well, Arkansas just has to throw the ball. And all right, where are these guys that just are these hellraisers off of the edge getting after the quarterback with all these athletic traits? With guys like Quay Walker, I remember the most eye-popping play for Walker was just his closing speed to a quarterback. Looked like some D Winners type stuff. Where I'm like, whoo, look how he closed on Bryce Young. So I would like, again, that's still a little bit of a red flag trying to figure out where does he fit best with the 49ers? Is it a guy that's early downs against the run because they had to defend the run so much, especially on early down? Or is it a guy where you're like, all right, maybe this hasn't been a strength of his, but we just want to really try to open up and utilize that athleticism in a wide 9, which he's actually more suited to play. And I say with guys that you draft in the 5th round, you could take more of a risk on somebody fitting something very specific like that to your team.
And I do think there will be more in Chris Kosarek's, the scheme on the defensive line, the wide 9 coming off the edge with a little bit more fire and a little bit more purpose in where you're trying to end up. Question is there a little bit more there or is there a lot more there? And so we mentioned the thing about being behind all these other first-round draft picks. Well, once Trayvon Walker went to college and you're a 6th-year senior and you're still rotating in with, a guy who's 3-4 years younger than you, another sophomore, who I'm sure is a big-time recruit as well. But it's just like, okay, even at that point, 6th-year super senior, you're still not the guy off the edge. That's worrisome. And even when he had the opportunities to really go get quarterbacks, like you mentioned with a team in Georgia that you have a big lead in a lot of these games, he still wasn't really getting home quickly enough. And when he did win, Croc, the number one thing I saw almost every time when he did win was because of his arm length. And so that's where I think you could dare to dream a little bit, because he's not the biggest guy, obviously. He undersized for edge rush purposes in the NFL, just under 6'4", just under 250 pounds, but he's got these really long arms. And it was hard for me to tell if he was just winning with his arms because they're so long and he just could get by guys because they couldn't get into his chest, or if there was some technique involved. And so you hope that there was a lack of technique, because that means he could be taught how to be even better with his hands and his arms, which would help accelerate his learning and his path to getting to the quarterback. Because it's weird to see a guy who's that raw and couldn't earn a lot of playing time being that athletic and that high of a recruit and being around that long. So something just didn't quite add up there with what I saw from him on the field. And when you look at his entire package and his entire athletic profile.
This is the guy I was most excited about. Just when the draft happened, and after you look at the draft, maybe D Winters more. But in the sense of just being excited, it was like D Winters and Robert Beal. Just because I love high-end traits. I like guys that are just kind of freaks and they do these things that's flashy. And I bank on the coaching staff to get these guys to be more consistent, right? That's why I haven't given up on Trey Lance yet. It's like, hey, get this guy to just be consistent. Now you got this super high-end players. So when I see Robert Beal, I'm not giving up on the fact that he could potentially be good. It's just alarming certain things where I'm just like, it doesn't quite make sense with all the other Georgia guys, but still having that ability. I'm excited to see how the 49ers really work to get that to be just more consistent. And can you get him to be a guy opposite Nick Bosa? Because ultimately that's what we're looking for. You got Drake Jackson. I hear all the reports. Drake Jackson, he looks great in the sense of his body and he's taking care of it and he's trying to take that next step. I don't know, but somebody got to be that guy. And if it's Robert Beal, again, I like the high upside. I like the traits. It's really interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, consistency is big because I want to see more consistency after 5 college years than what he showed on tape. And I want to see, maybe a little bit more like heavier hands when he is setting the edge. And generally he got the job done setting the edge. And like I said, kind of playing the run on the way to the quarterback. But I want to see more definitive wins in the run game. I want to see more definitive wins in the passing game. I just didn't see enough of those on tape. And Croc, tell me if I'm wrong. I didn't quite see 4.4 speed show up on tape. He's athletic and he really looks the part with his long arms and he's rocked up and muscled up, but I didn't quite see the 4.4 speed. And I think maybe it might be just a lack of, he does get off the line quick, which is what Chris Kocurek pointed to. They talked about the GTFO time for him. And he was pretty good at getting off the line, but it wasn't like an explosive movement off the line. And I think that's where you look at his athletic testing and you watch him play and you're like, wait a second. Okay. He ran 4.4, but 30-inch vertical, 4.42 short shuttle, 7.26 3-cone, 14 bench press reps. I know he has got long arms, and as a long-armed guy myself, I know how it can hinder your bench press. But if you take the 40 time out of it, his numbers were actually pretty pedestrian as far as testing goes. And I think there is a lack of functional explosion, even though there's some speed to his game, if that makes sense.
But even then, let's say there's a lack of some of those things. But still, the super long arms, like the height, just that length. I always think of edge rushers and that one arm stab. I think for him, he's definitely a guy that can develop more pass rush moves. But again, it's kind of hard because there was just so much thinking involved. At least what it looked like to me in the way he played defense. So putting it together, having more of a pass rush plan, I think those are the things that are going to really help him be able to contribute more to the 49ers defense.
Yeah, I want to see him coming off the end in the wide 9 scheme and, setting the edge or getting upfield as a pass rusher. I think that'll be exciting and less moving around, less in coverage. Even though he can do that, he's pretty athletic and can do some of those things. If you need him to go, if you're trying to change things up, show zone blitz or whatever, and go hang out in the flat, I think he can do that. But really just giving him, just saying, okay, this is 3rd down. You're on the field. You're lined up way wide. You're trying to beat that man around and get to the quarterback. Can you do it? Like, let's focus on that simple one task. And so that's where I want to see if he takes off. And if he doesn't, then his NFL career might not be that long. But being able to run a 4.4 and being that big, I think he will have some value on special teams, which is his path to the roster spot, and then getting in the door and then getting an opportunity to play on defense.
Right.
It was more difficult evaluation, though, compared to, I would say, this area of the draft. You mentioned it with D. Winters and then Darrell Luter, right, in the first 5th round pick. So the 2 5th rounders in Luter, Beal, and then the 6th rounder in Winters. Winters and Luter were pretty easy evaluations, I think, for me. A little bit more difficult with Beal, but again, some high-end traits to work with, which excite you when you can run 4.4 at that size and you have these long arms. That's tantalizing. Let's see if Chris Kocurek can get more out of Robert Beal than the Georgia defensive staff was able to. But I think if the 49ers do hit on one of those guys, it's in that 5th, 6th round area.
Right. And they've done well there. And I think that's what the fans and everyone's banking on. One of those guys, and probably 49ers too. Look, you don't have these high draft picks. Can we get one of those guys in that range right there? Because the kicker, he's going to be productive. He's going to be on the field. You got the tight end, and you want to see kind of what happens with him and all that with Latu. Okay. But right there, those 2 fifths in that 6, can we get one starter out of those guys? Can you get one starter and one role player?
Right. That'll be a huge key to this draft with not having any high picks. And, you drafted a kicker in the 3rd and you got a backup tight end in the 3rd. So you need Jair Brown to be a starter, and you need one of those other guys, those 5th, 6th rounders. One of those guys needs to be a starter, get some value with some role players. Now you're cooking. And
they don't have to be stars. I think we look at George Kittle. He's a 5th round pick. He's a superstar. For these guys, can you beat Diamador Lenore? Who, hey man, like if you need me to start, I can start. I can play games, and we could still have the #1 defense in the NFL. Can you beat that?
One more note on Beal. I want to talk about Steve Wilks and if we expect to be a lot different on defense. Talking defense today on Locked On 49ers next. Thanks once again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to all of the everydayers. We appreciate you so much, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. If you're not an everydayer, make sure you subscribed up. And you can always hit us on Twitter as well and say hi at BD Peacock, at Eric_Crocker. And maybe get involved with a mailbag segment upcoming. And we're always going live on YouTube at least once a week, sometimes twice a week here on Locked On 49ers. Did you see with Beal this is where I struggled with him because it was like, there was a nice play. He made the play. But did you see the thing like, that right there? Let's do that. Let's keep doing that more and more and more and more. Because I never really saw him go, okay, I'm getting the corner and I'm dipping under and I'm going to turn the corner and get low. Or I'm going to really just jar somebody at the line of scrimmage and shed him and make a play. It was kind of, everything was kind of like made the play, but didn't like, it didn't blow me away. Right. And I just wanted to see the one thing where I was like, there's the thing, do more of that. And I just kind of never really saw it. Even when he won, it was kind of like, okay, I've got long arms and I'm going to get by it. But it wasn't like, boom, boom, it's hard to explain, but it's just, I wanted to see one thing jump out at me. Did you see anything jump out where you're like, oh, there it is, Robert Beal, keep doing that?
Yeah, it wasn't there. And I know what you mean. That one thing you can hang your hat on, and we can count on him to be that. Right? Let's say Deebo Samuel. I think, and we've talked a lot about his game and how maybe he hasn't taken his game and maybe kind of went backwards in the sense of just being a route runner. Something I thought coming out of college, Deebo actually could run routes. And now it's like, just get the ball in his hands. But at least I can hang my hat on just getting the ball in Deebo's hands, and he's going to do the rest after the catch or handoff.
Slant God, right? Remember? Slant God. It was like, dude, this guy, Deebo Samuel in college averaged, I think it was 30 yards per slant.
Yeah,
average
last year.
When you target him on a slant, he averaged 30 yards, which is insane. And so it was like, I called him Slant God right out of the gate because it was like, okay, he can do that. And there is no doubt about it. With Beal, it's like, I think he might be able to do some things okay, but where's the thing he could just do great? Like Winters is like, this guy triggers, gets downhill, and can go after it. Like clear as day, you can see it from the first snap that you watch him. Darrell Luter, long arms. He can turn and run with guys and press man, and you see this very easily with Beal. I just never really saw it. I saw some things he could do, but I never saw things like he'll be this for sure.
Right. There were a couple of times I feel like he went unblocked and they were trying to put him in a pickle to see, if he would either bite down or if he'd still be able to make a play in space. And then he made the play in space. But that's not necessarily something you can hang your hat. Like teams aren't just going to let you be free every snap.
Right. You're going to get one of those a game maybe where you have a chance to do that.
And he might be better at that than Nick Bosa. I remember that was kind of the thing in the Kansas City Chiefs game. Kansas City Chiefs were like, we're not going to block Nick Bosa. And we're just going to leave him out of space.
It's hard to block him anyway, so let's not block him and hope that works.
Right. And then it worked, right? It kind of looked a little crazy. Now, I think he was coming off injury maybe, or he was coming off of something. But they just said, we're just not going to block him. And maybe if you're like, all right, they try to do something like this again, Bill is better suited to be in that type of position where he can kind of put his foot in the ground and he just has more speed, right? Like Nick Bosa was a 4.8 guy. He's explosive in that tight range, just line of scrimmage, getting to the quarterback, line of scrimmage, getting past his tackle, like that's Nick Bosa's game. not leave me out in space against, I don't know, guys that run 4.4s. Like that's not his thing. But maybe that could be Bill's thing.
Yeah, and chasing down those athletic quarterbacks. 49ers haven't been great at that. Maybe that'll be something that he's really good at. Okay, so
D winners. Look, we talk about these things with D winners and he triggers quick. Oh, the ultimate spy. Just okay, you got an athletic quarterback. We're gonna spy you with D winners, and you are not getting away.
I kind of like that. So you're spying with D Winters, and then you're containing on the other side with Beal, and there you got some athleticism to run down those athletic quarterbacks.
There we go. We just figured it out.
We're onto something there. How different do you expect things to look for Steve Wilks' defense, Croc? Because you said something interesting on social media yesterday about Wilks and the new defensive coordinator and why it might not look very different. And we've talked about this a little bit, but it's one of the things where you look at the 49ers like, okay, the quarterback position could be weird, but I think they'll figure it out. And they have 3 options to get it right. And they should be okay. Even in the worst of those 3 options, should be able to win some football games. And they have so much talent everywhere. But like another defensive coordinator, is there, and a guy they call it Kyle Shanahan doesn't call plays on defense, right? So like, could that be a place where it's like, oh man, it's a little weird on defense this year?
So I was asked the question on social media. Actually, I quote tweeted that DeAndre Hopkins, he got released, and I'm like, hey, 49ers got everything he's looking for. The initial tweet for him was he's looking for a team that has a quarterback that players rally around. I think that's
3 franchise quarterbacks.
If we got 3, Brock Purdy's the leader in the clubhouse, and it feels like all the teammates love him and the front office. So it's okay. You got a quarterback that rallies the troops. You got a guy that people can get behind. And then it was like a GM that solidified. Well, you hear the offseason stuff. Is it going to go to TV? But hey, at the end of the day, if it's not John Lynch, it's Kyle Shanahan. They're both pretty much a GM, and you're solidified there. And then the other one was a defense. And the 49ers had number 1 defense last year. And I got a response from someone saying, well, good luck with the defense. It's probably not going to be that good. You guys lost your defensive coordinator. And I was like, I'm going to let you know a little secret here. 49ers defensive coordinator is really Kyle Shanahan. Like that's he's the guy. And when he went through the hiring process, all right, and it's been like that for years now. All right, well, you know what, Robert Saleh, you're going to come here, but I'm going to identify you as the guy because I want you to run this defense. You're going to run the Seattle scheme. You came from that defense. I really like that defense. I understand the rules and different things. You see how I just destroyed the Seattle Seahawks in the postseason. So I know how to attack it, but I want you to run that defense. And then when it wasn't working, it's like, you know what? Hey, we could probably do these things and go to more of a 2 high, and then that can kind of eliminate some of that crosser. So I want you to run that. And then, okay, hey, we're going to hire a new defensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans. I want you to run the defense that we were just running at the end of the tenure for Robert Saleh. So run that defense, DeMeco Ryans. And Kelly Witherspoon, hey, I don't want him in the game. So I'm also going to kind of put my foot down sometimes when it comes to some of your personnel that's out there as well. All right. And then DeMeco goes off. And now he has to hire another coordinator. A lot of people thought it would be Fangio. No, it's not going to be Fangio because I can't tell Fangio what to do. All right. So I'm going to go hire Wilks. And Wilks, I really, I like you for your mind, and I like the way you're able to relate to players and things like that. Continue to be that guy, but you're going to run a defense that I want you to run. So really secretly, will there be a drop-off? It's hard to maintain being just the number 1 defense every year, but I think the defense will be really good because the guy pulling the strings on the defense is actually Kyle Shanahan. He calls plays to his defense. We talked about his conservative nature, and you'll dive deeper into those stats. All right. I've talked about how I thought it was really weird. I'm like, man, you got Deebo Samuel, and you got Brandon Ayuk, and you got George Kittle, and you got Chris Mick. You got all these guys, and you got. It's just a ton of guys. But you know what? I'm still going to be very conservative, and I'm going to lean on this defense because secretly he runs the defense, and he thinks like a defensive coach. So I think that there won't be as much of a drop-off. I think at the end of the day, this will still be a team that's a top 8 team defensively. Now, going up from number 1 to number 8, obviously there is a drop-off there, but I don't think it'll be a noticeable drop-off in the sense of just the 49ers being a bad defensive team.
And yeah, it really comes down to, just calling the plays on the field in the game. If the scheme's the same and, they're working together and Kyle Shanahan has a big hand in it, could it be that bad of him? Just he's not good play caller. Like that, it would have to be at that level for the 49ers defense to drop off because of their defensive coordinator. in all likelihood. You tease something there, Croc. We're out of time here today. Let's get into it tomorrow with Wink on another Winky Wednesday episode. There are some stats here about conservative coaches and their longevity in their job positions. And the 6 teams that had the highest punt rate on 4th and 1s from their own 40-yard line or closer last year. So I'm going to tease that stat. I'm going to tease another stat about how often 49ers have a quarterback that plays every game for them over the course of the season. And it seems like it's not a lot. It's even fewer than I think most people realize. Also, Christian McCaffrey talking about running back value, which I think is fascinating too. This is something I've talked about a lot and something I've talked about as it pertains to Christian McCaffrey and his value to the 49ers. So all that coming up on future episodes of Locked On 49ers. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen. Back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.